What is... Dax, are you?
Tracking all our cars on Carvana Value Tracker on all our devices? Yes, Kristen, yes I am.
Well, I've been looking for my phone for...
In Dax's domain, we see all. So we always know what our cars are worth.
All of them?
All of them. Value surge, trucks up 3.9%.
That's a great offer.
I know. Sell?
Sell.
Track your car's value with Carvana Value Tracker today.
Oh, sheet.
Honey, chill. It's just laundry.
Not that. I'm talking about these Arm & Hammer Power Sheets. All the power of Arm & Hammer laundry detergent in a convenient tossable sheet.
Oh, sheet.
That's what I'm saying.
And Arm & Hammer Power Sheets deliver an effective clean at a great price. Think of all the laundry we'll do.
And all the money we'll save. Oh, sheet.
Arm & Hammer, more power to you.
There is no greater high as a lawyer than overturning someone's conviction and seeing them walk out of prison to meet their family and loved ones and regain their life. It's just such a long struggle, and those days when it finally does happen are the best days.
That's Audrey McGinn, a senior attorney with the Innocence Center in San Diego, California. Following season 2 of Proof, the Innocence Center, along with the Northern California Innocence Project, decided to take Jake on as a client. They now represent him in seeking to have his wrongful conviction overturned. And they hope that one day, in the hopefully not too distant future, Jake, too, can be one of the clients that they get to watch walk out of prison. Recently, Kevin and Jacinda were out in California and met with Audrey to talk to her about where Jake's case is now. In this update episode of Proof Season 2, you'll hear about what's going on in this case and about the DNA testing, and why we're hopeful that an even bigger update is just around the corner. I'm Susan Simpson, and I'm here with a special update on Season 2 of Proof. In Season 2, we covered the murder of 18-year-old Renee Ramos in Manteca, California. 24 years ago now, her boyfriend Jake Silva was arrested for her murder, along with Ty Lopes, the uncle of one of Jake's friends. Proof is a Red Marble Media production in association with Glassbox Media. Kevin and Jacinda's recent meeting with Audrey was their first time meeting her in person. Though I'd actually met her before last year, when I basically cornered her in a hotel lobby and did my best to convince her to take on Jake's case.
When did you first hear about Jake's case?
I first heard about Jake's case at the Innocence Conference for the Innocence Network in New Orleans. My boss came up to me and said, "You have to meet Susan. She has this amazing case." And Susan came up to me and we had a drink.
Are you sure your boss didn't come up and say, "There's these annoying girls"?
I'm the one who gets assigned all the DNA cases, and we knew there was going to be a DNA angle here. And I'm not going to lie that Susan and I had a great time at the conference. I remember a brown drink in a short glass.
So we should note that Kevin, we're actually here in person with you, meeting for the first time, which is very exciting. Susan could not be here because she's recently had a baby. So I know she wishes she could be here. So Susan pitches you this case, and I'm sure, obviously, you did your own research. What stood out to you about Jake's case?
Jake's case, it was pretty clear that it was a mess from the beginning, that Josh had no credibility, and that seemed to be the linchpin of the case, and that there was no real evidence against him. And in a lot of these cases, especially now that we're in 2025, a lot of the DNA cases, the easy DNA cases, have dried up. They were able to do DNA testing at trial, so we're not able to get cases where we can maybe do some DNA testing now to show who the real perpetrator is. And Jake's case is one of those that we're like, oh my gosh, if we can do DNA testing here, it could really, really help him. That jointly with the mess of all the other evidence could just really be pivotal for him.
Yeah, it does seem like, I don't want to call it a sweet spot, but it does seem like there's this kind of between like 1990 and 2000 maybe, where there's a lot of DNA wrongful conviction stuff going on.
Yeah.
Like just as DNA is becoming more prevalent and people are starting to understand it more, I guess. I'm not sure.
I think it was really costly. And so if the district attorney's office and the police thought that they could get a conviction without having to do it, I think it was good. I think they did it in really high profile cases. But otherwise, if they thought that they could convict without it, then they didn't seek further DNA testing. And even when they did, it was not very discriminatory. They needed large samples to be able to get any meaningful results. And so cases like this, they did some DNA testing and he was found on our clothes, but that wasn't surprising at the time because they knew each other and were in a really intimate relationship. After 2005, it seems like they were really doing some heavy DNA testing whenever they could because juries love it after CSI and all that nonsense.
So at the Innocence Center where you work, are you exclusively DNA cases or you take all?
Nope.
Okay.
There's only 3 of us on the litigation team currently. We would love to have more lawyers doing it. We've all kind of taken little specialties, and I'm assigned a lot of different types of cases, but I am kind of the DNA consultant in the office.
Following a court hearing in September of 2024, the DA's office in San Joaquin County agreed to allow Jake to submit evidence in his case for new DNA testing, including Renee's clothing and her necklaces, which have never before been tested. And all that evidence is now at the lab, awaiting DNA testing.
All of the evidence except for one piece is at the lab. They have to catalog all the evidence and kind of sort through it and do some presumptive tests, especially for like items of clothing, because the DNA testing that we have these days is so discriminatory that they have to take little samples from the items of clothing and stuff. And so they have done that cataloging yet, but we have not gotten any results. We're hoping for some results in the next 1, 2, 3 months of whether they or not they were able to get a profile from the evidence that was sent to the lab.
And so help us understand why it takes so long.
In post-conviction cases, there are no longer constitutional speedy trial rights. And so in any case, pre-trial is going to come first, sadly. We are at a private lab, and they are obviously a for-profit lab, and they just have a huge backlog of cases. And we can try to expedite it, but everybody asks for expedited testing.
Right.
And these things just take forever, and especially in Jake's case when there are many, many items that we're seeking to test, and the items have been in storage for a long time. The lab has just like a lot of policies that they need to do that take a long time.
Right. So it is a matter of just time and being patient.
It is the most hard waiting time is when you know the evidence is at the lab and you could get testing results back at any time. It literally could be any day.
Right.
We just don't know.
Yeah.
And any day could be 6 months from now. I can't
and then
rush them.
What's the process? It doesn't end there, though. Let's say you get a call from the lab tomorrow and they're like, okay, we have the results. Then what? What are we looking at timeline-wise?
The results will come back in a report. Sometimes they call us with preliminary results, but they'll write an official report. We're hoping that the testing comes back with the same profile on multiple items, and they call that a redundant profile on various items. That means it's not just a rogue profile from somebody sneezing on her or somebody hugging her a week ago if she was wearing that shirt. So a redundant profile where we believe the perpetrator would have touched is ideal. And having that be a singular male profile would be amazing. And then we would have to seek further litigation for them to upload it into CODIS.
Can you just explain what the CODIS database is for people who might not know?
There's statewide and nationwide DNA database where they store people's profiles. For example, here in California, anybody arrested for a felony over the past several years, I can't remember when that legislation took effect, but anybody arrested for a felony, they will take their DNA sample and upload it to CODIS. And there are really stringent requirements on what profiles later can be uploaded to be searched. And so you have to make sure that it is the perpetrator profile because we don't want to be uploading victim profiles into the database, right? And it has to be a good enough profile to upload in there. So if we get results of only a partial profile, ththose are not uploadable into CODIS.
So there's a benchmark. It has to meet certain.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be certain enough good DNA from the evidence to be able to search it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. That doesn't mean it can't be compared if we have other known suspects. And so if then we could convince the DA's office, like, listen, if it's a partial profile, we don't know who it is, we can't upload it into CODIS, why don't we get some reference sample from some other known suspects and compare it to them? We could still do that. And we have some other good suspects in this case to try to do that. But if it isn't them, then we're just...
And where does that...
It's a different game.
Like legally, is that something that... I don't know. Do you need like a search warrant or probable cause?
We wouldn't be able to do it. The DA's office or one of their investigators could do it.
Okay.
We could have them voluntarily. We could go ask them to voluntarily submit a sample.
Okay.
They don't have to.
Right.
I don't have the ability to get a search warrant as a private defense attorney. Even public defenders can't get that. The DA's office or the sheriff's department or somebody could get that. And I think in this case, hopefully they would be motivated to do that.
Right. So it's could be a long road ahead.
It could be a long road ahead.
The DNA results come in, and then as an attorney, you decide what's going to happen after that. Because you could speculate all day long. You just don't know until you get the results.
Right.
Hey, Susan, how are you doing with the new baby?
Currently trying to record with a 3-week-old in my lap, and it's going okay. But otherwise, kind of hectic.
I'm sure it is. Hectic is probably not quite descriptive enough of what it's like to have a newborn baby. But how are you doing with your meals?
Yeah, luckily I can still eat because of Factor. I'm a huge Factor fan anyway, and now I love them forever. Otherwise, I'd probably have starved to death by now. Factor is a meal delivery service that gives you fresh, never frozen meals ready in 2 minutes in the microwave. You're good to go. You can eat between feedings. It's a lifesaver. And it's also delicious.
Yeah, I can imagine if you didn't have Factor, you would probably starve to death right now.
Uh-huh. I would have for sure. But with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, Factor makes it easy to pick meals that are tailored to your goals and needs. You can choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto.
And Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared. Perfect for any active, busy lifestyle, or when you have a newborn baby to take care of.
So eat smart with Factor. You can get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box, plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the US. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IPworkswonders.
One thing Jake's attorneys have done in the meantime, though, while waiting for DNA results to get back, is to file a discovery motion requesting access to the trial file in his case. That's something that we weren't able to obtain when we were investigating Jake's case, due to California's restrictive laws regarding public access to case records. But now that Jake has counsel, his lawyers were able to get access to that file.
So we just got a lot of that discovery from the district attorney's office, and we're going through it and have found a medical examiner to go through and see if it's even medically possible for the crime to have occurred the way Josh describes it. Right. For example, we have had a consult with a forensic entomologist, which is essentially a forensic bug doctor. But what they needed was better photos of the crime scene and better photos of any of the insect evidence on the body from the time. And we just didn't have those photos to be able to give them.
Right.
And even now, if they don't have the opportunity to inspect a body at the time and collect that evidence themselves, it's difficult, but we're trying to pursue everything that we can while we're waiting in case we need it.
So another question we get is about Ty and what options his family has, if any. And I know you don't represent Ty or his family, but are there options for them?
I mean, I'm really hoping the DNA results come back in a really conclusive way, that the DA's office is persuaded that this was a wrongful conviction for both, not only Jake, but for Ty. In an ideal world, that would mean a posthumous exoneration for Ty also. I haven't really explored that option because I'm not Ty's attorney.
Right.
But if it could help him and help his family in some sort of closure, that would be amazing.
Yeah. So if any lawyers are listening and have the time and would like to take on a case.
Yeah, for sure. And we have a ton of contacts who would be able to do that also. And we might be able to do it jointly depending on how the results come back. But Lauren and I are doing our best to go through the case file, which is extremely large. Go through all the witness interviews that you all have done and seeing what we can do in the meantime while we're waiting for DNA results to be ready to kind of hit the ground running if they're not what we want them to be.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then this case is just really interesting because it's not going to be surprising at all if Jake shows up on any of these.
Yeah, it'd
tests.
be surprising if he doesn't show up in a way.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's who else shows up.
Who else shows up? And if it's just Jake, that still doesn't mean that he did this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It just means that the person who did this didn't leave any DNA behind.
Whoever did it could have been wearing gloves.
Yep. Even then, like, I just filed a DNA motion today in a different case, and I got an expert declaration because in that case, the perpetrator was wearing gloves and a condom, strangely. And in that case, I was able to talk to some DNA experts, and the act of putting on the gloves can leave your own DNA on the outside of the gloves. So when you touch somebody else, can leave trace amounts of DNA.
Okay.
Also, the act of putting on a condom can leave DNA on the outside of the condom that could then be transferred to someone else, whether it's a victim or a consensual partner or whomever.
Right.
And so that doesn't mean there isn't DNA on the gloves because you can touch your face after putting on gloves. You can touch your hair. You touch the other outside of parts of your clothes. If you sneeze into your gloves, there's a ton of saliva and DNA on that. And so you'll leave behind less DNA than bare hands, but it doesn't mean that there won't be DNA even if the person used gloves. I mean, the DNA right now is just so crazy. There's cases now where if you just take a shirt and you don't touch the surface of a table, you just kind of shake the shirt over the table, that your DNA could be on the table.
Really?
Yes.
It's that sensitive?
Yes.
Wow.
Testing right now is super discriminatory. And of course it degrades with time.
Right.
Depending on how it was stored, depending on how it was left, depending on what happened to that evidence after the DNA was put there. And I don't want anyone to interpret this as meaning that DNA testing is so sensitive that anybody who touched her's DNA will be on her necessarily. Right. It just means it's possible that the person who touched her...
It's possible that even if the perpetrator took precautions that they would still show up.
Yes.
And they would,
Not as likely, but possible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
DNA testing is a lot more sensitive than it was 25 years ago when this crime occurred. That opens up a lot of new possibilities for Jake. And the first step for the lab is to figure out what parts of the evidence testing needs to be focused on.
So that's like what the lab is doing now. Okay. So they'll go through and see where there's the highest concentration of DNA. And for clothing, especially because they think that she might have been sexually assaulted in this case, they'll take the cuttings from the clothes from the places that are most likely to have left the perpetrator DNA.
Okay.
Or, for example, if they're trying to do DNA testing from a shirt, I have another case where the shooter discarded their shirt while fleeing a crime scene. And so, like, on a shirt, the likelihood of higher quantities of DNA in certain spots of the shirt. And they call it wearer's DNA. Like, it's not the technical, but just kind of like the common term. So around your neck is where it rubs on your collars, on your armpits.
I was going to say armpits, yeah.
And in sexual assaults, like the hem of a shirt where somebody would have pulled it up, or buttons on pants where they would have taken pants off. So they'll look at those places first and do some presumptive sampling to see if there's quantities of DNA, to see if it's a good spot for DNA testing. Because every spot that we test costs thousands of dollars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we expect this to cost probably $30,000.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that much.
It's a scary figure, and it's so cost prohibitive, and you all have to pay for it.
Yeah.
That's how you get the state to
We've
agree
offered
to
to
it.
pay for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's because it's easier to get the state to agree to the testing if you're paying for it.
Right. Otherwise, you claim that you're indigent and that the state will pay for it, but then they're really choosy about what they're going to allow you
They might
to
not
test.
as much.
They might not
many
test as many
items.
things. And in this case, there are many hairs, and so every hair that you test costs money.
Wow.
And everything you test is an opportunity to get the results that Jake needs for his case.
Yeah. And so we're testing everything. Everything that we can test, we are testing. And again, we're hoping for a redundant profile between a bunch of the items to show that this isn't a rogue profile.
Most defendants in wrongful conviction cases can't afford to pay tens of thousands of dollars for DNA testing, let alone for the attorneys required to seek such testing in the first place. Jake is no exception to that. Without groups like the Innocence Center that take on such cases pro bono, there'd be no way for him or for others in his position to ever challenge their convictions.
We are grant and private donation funded. If you're interested in doing that, go to theinnocencenter.org. We would love your donations, especially in these times where we don't know if we'll be able to continue having federal funding like we have depended on for the past 20 years. So we depend on private donations and then state and federal grants to be able to do this work without having to charge any of our clients any money.
Well, it was very nice to finally meet you in person.
You guys too. You guys too.
And thank you so much
you
for
so
taking
much.
Jake's case and keeping us updated. And can't wait for that phone call to come with the news.
I know. I hope it's soon.
I do too.
Your data is like gold to hackers. They're selling your passwords, bank details, and private messages. McAfee helps stop them. Secure VPN keeps your online activity private. AI-powered text scam detector spots phishing attempts instantly. And with award-winning antivirus, you get top-tier hacker protection. Plus, you'll get up to $2 million in identity theft coverage, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Jake's attorney, Audrey McGinn, was not the only person that Kevin and Jacinda were able to meet with on their recent trip out to California. There was someone else that they were finally able to visit as well.
Kevin and I are at the R.J. Donovan prison in Southern California, and we are sitting here in the car waiting until it is our time to go in to visit Jake.
And this prison is literally at the end of the earth. You pass the U.S.-Mexico border wall on your way into the prison, and somehow makes it even more depressing.
It does make it depressing. It's such a weird thing because, you know, we're sitting here in the parking lot and what we see is barbed wire fences and palm trees, right? And when you think of palm trees, you think of paradise. And this is so far from paradise.
Yeah, this is not paradise. Happy and excited to finally meet Jake face to face.
Yeah. The first time I spoke to Jake on the phone, we were still in the midst of doing Proof Season 1.
Yeah, it's been a number of years, and happy to finally meet him. But I believe that this is the first time he's had a visitor at the prison, other than a lawyer. in over a decade.
Unfortunately, most of Jake's family is gone, and it's so far away from where his life was.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good sort of 8-9 hour drive from Antigua, and
yeah, it's bittersweet. I'm excited to see him, but I wish I was seeing him walking out the doors.
Yes, I think it'll be a tough visit in many ways.
All right, you ready?
Kevin's math was wrong there, but not by much. It had actually been 9 years since Jake last had a non-attorney visit. And in all that time, he's only had one attorney visit. That was last year when his new attorneys came to see him. So Jacinda and Kevin having a chance to meet with him in person was a big deal for Jake. Unfortunately, the California prison system does not allow recording in person with specific inmates. So Jacinda and Kevin were not able to record anything with Jake for the podcast. But they were able to speak with him for a few hours.
So we just got out of our visit with Jake, and I'm kind of at a loss for words. It was so good to see him in person and to hug him, but it was also really sad and depressing.
Yeah, because you know that he shouldn't be inside, and he is, and although we're doing everything we can to help change that, I think he was really happy to see us, but it's also sad for him, right? It's painful for him, I think,
right.
too.
It's painful for him, and he's angry, rightfully so, that he's still there 25 years later. And I think it's hard for him to hear us say, stay hopeful, and you're almost there, and we're getting closer. Like, he doesn't want to hear that because he's living it.
Yeah, you know, he said something to me towards the end, which he goes, I get used to being in limbo. You get used to it. So I think that's his like mechanism. Like, he doesn't get too hopeful. It was great to see him. It was hard, you know?
Yeah, it was really hard. And it was hard to leave.
Yeah.
Because we don't know when we'll see him again. And
so we'll try and get back and see him soon. And, you know, hopefully he's getting closer to the day where he can walk out the door.
Yeah. I think we sound very like down and depressed.
Yeah.
But Jake, you know, it seems like he's doing okay.
You know, we had a really good time talking to him, and we had a lot of laughs. But it's also, you know, it's emotionally tough for him, and
it's emotionally tough for us too. Like, we know the truth.
Right.
We know the truth, and so seeing him behind bars is so painful. Like, it seems like it should be such a simple solution. At some point over the course of our reporting, we become responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Or I feel like I become responsible.
Because nobody else has been. And, you know, I think that's why we take these on. You and I know it full well now. That's what happened with Lee and Kane, and it's what happened with Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's what's happening with Jake. And you start to feel responsible. That's right. But everybody have a good thought for Jake, and hopefully we're going to have some legal updates on his case soon.
Because Jake's prison is so far away from home, it had been a long time since he had any visitors. But he told Jacinda and Kevin that after season 2 of Proof aired, people from his old life in Antigua had begun reaching out to him, including one person he'd been very surprised to hear from, Renee's mother, Donna Ramos. After getting back from California, Jacinda caught up with Donna to hear from her what that had been like. Donna said that a few months after the podcast aired, she'd written to Jake and they'd exchanged some letters. And then, before long, she did something that she never imagined she'd find herself wanting to do. She arranged for a video visit with the man who was convicted of her daughter's murder.
Him and I talked to each other, and the first day he called me on the video call, we were both just crying together. It was just really emotional. We've had several video calls since probably the end of January.
Wow. So what was your letter to him back in May? What did you want to say to him?
Oh, I just let him know that I listened to the podcast, and I was just overwhelmed by everything, all of the information that came out, and that I'm going to start crying. I cry every time I think about it. But I just let him know that I was, I really thought he was innocent, and that all these years have gone by, and I thought he was guilty of murdering Renee, and I wanted to just let him know that I was on his side, that we were rooting for him and praying for him. It makes me emotional. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. It is. Don't be sorry.
I cry just thinking about it. But yeah, so
yeah,
I wrote the letter, and then he wrote me back. He said, sorry it took so long. He was very shocked when he got my letter. He just said he just cried for days, rereading it and looking at it. And he finally wrote me back. I'm really glad that him and I are able to talk.
How does Jake sound 25 years later? Does he sound the same to you?
I never really talked to him 25 years ago. I really never had any conversations with him.
Right.
So when I heard his voice, for the first time on the podcast last year, when the podcast came out, that was like the first time I listened to his voice.
Right.
Back when he was dating Renee, I really never had any conversations with him. We never really we didn't really hang out together because, of course, I didn't like him, and Renee knew I didn't like him, so he didn't really come around me very often.
And I'm sure talking to Jake now brings back a lot of stuff, with Renee as well.
Yeah. I like it because I feel like him and I have this connection that we probably had for a long time, but just didn't know it,
Yeah.
I just, we have a good connection, I don't know if he said anything, how he felt when he talked to me, but I feel like we're friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks a lot different now. He's big.
Yeah. He's
got tattoos all over. And, I saw the picture when he sent me the picture of him, and I said, wow, he looks a lot different than he did back when he was 18. He's just bigger all the way around. And he was tall and thin, like a skater. He was tall and thin. He didn't have any fat on him back then. And he's big now. But his head is really what I was like, wow, he's got tattoos his whole head is tattooed.
I think part of that is, for protection. He bulked up and he's strong. And he said something to us about the way he looks and how he became the monster everyone thought he was. Physically, like he made himself the monster everyone thought he was.
Mm.
Yeah, and
yeah, that's sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's spent his whole adult life in prison.
Are you glad you reached out to him? Are you glad you've renewed this? Or I guess not renewed, it's not even the right word. Are you glad you're building this friendship?
Yes, I have this feeling like, how do you explain it? Like, I feel like a big weight has been lifted off my chest.
Mm-hmm.
Because all these years, I really wanted to talk to him. I really deep down wanted to, but then I never really reached out because I thought he was guilty. But deep down, even though I knew he was guilty all these years, I felt like he was guilty. I still wanted to reach out, and something inside of me wanted to just talk to him
mm-hmm.
or just see him. I think years ago, I remember one time I said something to my daughter. I said, I'd like to just go see him and just like go see him someday. But I never like reached out to try to do it.
Yeah.
So due to the podcast, this is, if it wasn't for you and Susan and Kevin, this probably would never have happened,
Well, I'm glad that it's helpful and that you feel like the weight's been lifted a little bit, and
yeah.
And I hope we can get Jake out.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah.
I know.
We're all hoping.
We're all hoping. Yeah.
We don't know when the call is going to come in from the lab. With the news, the DNA testing has been completed. And no matter what those results are, that won't be the end of Jake's journey. Even if we do find out that someone's DNA has been recovered from the evidence, then the process will begin to find out whose DNA it is. But we may soon be a whole lot closer to getting answers to what happened to Renee 25 years ago. And when that happens, we'll be back to update you.
You've been listening to Proof, a podcast by Red Marble Media in association with Glassbox Media. Send us your questions and comments at proofcrimepod@gmail.com. Follow us everywhere with the handle @proofcrimepod and on our website, proofcrimepod.com. Thanks so much for listening.